Hello, my sunshines, and welcome back to your session with me, Dr. Deborah Brown. And this is episode 3 in our season 4 brain series. And today we're talking about neuroplasticity. And that word sounds very big and very frightening, and it's really not. It's actually a very exciting way to understand your own brain. And our tagline is how we make real change happen. So, neuroplasticity is basically the thing you need to understand about your brain in order to change the way that you look at the world. So, this is a really important episode because it really is going to help you to understand that you have more power than you think you do when it comes to operating your brain. And the problem is, we don't have operating instructions. We don't have this manual that says this is how you use your brain. And today I'm going to give you a little bit of an operating manual because these are things that we really weren't taught. And I had to learn through many years of grad school and also many years of working with people to see what works and what doesn't. So you're going to get a little edge here. You're going to get some techniques that I know work and some explanations that'll help you to understand your brain a little bit better because your brain is driving you from birth to death. The driver is your brain. And if your brain is not healthy or your brain is not operating in a way that it's changing as it should change, you're really not living your best life. And that's really what we're doing here on the podcast. We're trying to give you tips and tricks to help you live your best life from a mental health standpoint. And when you live your best life through your mental health, everything else follows. All right. So, our minds can do lots of things. They can fight with reality, they can argue with the way things are, or they can process reality effectively. And our goal is for you to process reality effectively in a balanced way that sees both good and bad and doesn't get stuck in the bad. It's the very definition of mental health, right? Is that if you see reality in a way that's very dark and very hopeless, you can end up with depression. If you see reality in a way that's very distorted, you can end up with anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder. So the idea is I need you to use your brain to filter reality and see reality in a way that makes you feel better, not worse. So, what does your mind attend to? I want you to think about that question for a second. What does your mind attend to? What are you focusing on most of the time? What are you stuck on? What your mind attends to creates your reality. So right now, the only thing my mind is attending to is you, my sunshine, is that I'm sharing information with you. So that feels really good. I'm not attending to all of the other things. And we need moments like that. But if you are overwhelmed with anxious thinking, your mind is attending to things that can get in the way of what's happening in the present. So I want you during this hour to just attend to listening and to thinking about how these things affect you. And then when you get out of this, I want you to consider what your mind is attending to and where it's going. So, the issue with our minds is that we have only very recently begun to understand the brain. As little as 40 years ago, we were saying things like, we only use 10% of our brain and things that weren't true. Neuroscience is one of the newest fields, and it's very exciting to me. It's one of the things I love to read about. I know it sounds boring to most people, but I love to read about it because it's all new stuff that we didn't know. So before neuroscience, the people that talked about our brains were philosophers and artists and writers. And they've always examined our brains, but didn't really have the answers. And I'm going to read you some. So the Buddhists said that the mind shapes your experience. What a beautiful thing. Now that's true. The mind shapes your experience. The way that you view something shapes how you experience it. The Stoics in ancient Greece said men are disturbed by not by things, but by the views they take on them. So that's pretty smart too. It's not about what happens, it's how you look at it. Smart. Shakespeare, my favorite. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That's the ultimate truth, right? Is that something can happen to you, and the way that you think about it determines the impact of that thing. And we're going to talk about how all of this is very true and that your mind shapes the experience of your life. So, only recently neuroscience has been able to expose to us that the way we think is about our brain. It's about our experience and not a character flaw. Everything used to be about discipline and thinking positive. And now we're beginning to realize is that there are structures in our brain, physical structures in our brain that impact our ability to have discipline and to think positive. And the best way I want to explain this to you, the concept of how we change all of that, neuroplasticity is a pathway, ability to change a pathway, I should say, that we have neural pathways in our brain. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the science, but understand that everything that you do maybe automatically or you problem solve. But the automatic things are a neural pathway that you follow within your brain. Think of it like a path. And I'll give you a great example. When I was growing up, I grew up on a dairy farm and we had a big field that the cows walked through to get milked twice a day. And I would notice, even as a little girl, that there was this little trail through the big field that went from the field to the milk house. And hundreds of cows would all cram in to walk on this little trail. Now they had the whole field to walk on, but they walked on that little trail. And as you can imagine, there was now a path, a cleared out path in the middle of the field. And our brains are like that. We have the whole world to think about. We have the whole field to walk through. But yet we will go to the familiar as the route to get there. So this is why people say, I know what I should be doing, but I can't do it. It's because you're walking on the familiar path instead of making a new one. So think about the best example of this is what we're seeing now with GLPs and weight loss. 1 in 8 people in America is taking a GLP injection or a pill to lose weight. And we're finding that it's the best weight loss thing ever. People are losing weight. It's working. It's not appearing to affect people's health in terrible ways if they're doing it correctly. But what we're finding is that post the end of that medication, like every other diet and weight loss, people gain the weight back. So even though it's a great solution, it still has the same effect in the long run as if you really don't change, you go back. And the reason is if you were on one path walking for 20 years and then take your GLP for a year and walk a new path, that old path is still much more well worn than the new path. It's easy to go back to the old path that you walked for 20 years. That's what neuroplasticity is. It's the ability to say, I've started a new path and I'm going to keep walking on it until that's my only path. And another example that I use, and I really love this example, I've used it so many times because it works, is if you're standing in front of the woods and there's a path into the woods already made, you're going to go down that path. That's how you get into the woods. There's already a path. And that's what our brain does. It takes the most likely way in. But what if that takes an hour to get through the woods that way? And what if you made a different path, it only took 5 minutes? Well, you'd say, of course I want the other path. But it doesn't exist, and you have to create it. So you have to get a machete and chop down the woods, and that's really hard, and then take that path. And there are brambles, and you get scratched, and it's hard, and the ground is bumpy. But eventually, after taking that path 15, 20, 100 times, you realize that path is better. That's what our brain resists. It resists all of that work and all of that struggle. And our brains want to keep us safe and take the easy way. So your brain is going to say, take the path that already exists. But if you want to make change, you create the new path and you walk it a lot. And what happens is the old path grows over. And then there's only the new path. That's what a neural pathway in your brain is. It's a very simple explanation. Any change you need to make, you need to do a hard thing, you need to become aware, and you need to do the work. And then you have to repeat it even when it doesn't feel good. Think about exercise, right? If you just exercise once, it doesn't do a whole lot. But if you exercise over and over again, it gets easier, theoretically, and you get a result. And then eventually it just becomes part of your day. But if you don't do it long enough, you go back to not exercising. So this is what I want you to understand about neuroplasticity is that you can make changes, but change is hard and change can have a really good result. But change takes a lot of work and a lot of repetition because you have to change your brain and the pathway that the thoughts travel. It sounds huge, but the reward is wonderful. So when you think about what you pay attention to in a course of a day, you're shaping those pathways. And you can have the same experience as someone else and completely look at it differently. And the tricky part is that if you look at a car accident, this is a great example. Me and my friend are in the back of a car, and we get into an accident, and that's bad, right? That's what's tricky. This is a bad situation. How am I going to make anything good about it? But we both experienced the same car accident. But my friend walks away traumatized and shaking and afraid to drive. And I walk away and go, we didn't get hurt. There's barely a dent. That was a lucky day, right? Who do you think is going to feel better the next day? The person that held it and traveled down the road of fear? My friend who says, I'm not going to drive anymore. It's unsafe out there. Or me that says, wow, we got out okay. We experienced the same exact thing, but we were building different ideas about it. It captured our attention in a different way. And I'll be better for it. And I won't suffer because I'll view myself as lucky that it wasn't worse. I'm building a neural pathway around driving that says driving is dangerous, but sometimes it's okay. And the other person builds a pathway that says, I could really get hurt. Driving is dangerous. So, what you give your attention to in any given day creates your belief system. So, think about routines, right? One of the interesting things that we do with neural pathways is we create routines. We brush our teeth the same way. You don't even have to think about it. You just brush your teeth. And all these things we do in a course of a day, we put the cat food in the cat dish, or we scrape the litter box, or all the things we do so automatically because we've done them so many times. That routine is really good for us. We like routine. One of the things we do with people who are very deeply depressed is we find new routines that help get them out of depression. So because routine is so good, we love it. But routine has to be balanced with something called novelty. Your brain needs to have security and comfort and predictability in your routines. We don't want life to be crazy, but there has to be a dose of novelty or something different that challenges your brain and makes your brain realize that it can solve problems. So think about really, really old people that kind of become shut-ins, and they stay in their house and they get up and they eat their breakfast and they read their newspaper and they watch their TV and they go to bed early. The world gets very, very small and very routine, which feels safe but doesn't challenge them. And we see a lot of elderly populations affected by loneliness, which has been proven to decrease your lifespan, versus novelty, going out and having a connection, being outside and moving around, going places and seeing things. So the idea is your brain needs a combination of safety and stability and novelty. And we have to get that balance right. We have to be interested in our lives and challenge our brains because our brains want to solve problems, but they can't be solving problems based on fear. So we're going to explain that. So if we explore and learn, we realize that we can be surprised and that it's safe. We realize that we can have new experiences and that that's safe. Your brain is always searching for threats. What if we teach our brain that something new and novel or out of routine isn't a threat, that it could be an opportunity? And I used the example last time about a preschooler who goes to preschool and goes, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me today? It's kind of like that. The preschooler knows they're safe. They know their teachers. They know their building that they're going to be in, but they don't know what's going to happen during that day. And that's precisely how they grow and learn. is they are exposed to all these new things all day, letters and numbers and colors and songs. And all of that learning in the context of safety is how they grow. We're the same throughout our lifespan. So it's interesting. So that's why you have to be so careful about your thoughts, and you have to pay attention to your thoughts, because your thoughts about things, about novelty, about surprises will actually create your reality. And there's something called the Rosenthal effect that's really, really interesting. And it's about how we believe what we're told and we can create reality from it. It's a study where two groups were put in a study, and the groups are about the same intellectually, about the same IQ. And one group was told that they were gifted and highly intelligent, and the other group was told that they were average. Who do you think performed better when they did tests? Well, the people that thought that they were gifted and that they were high potential, they actually performed better because their reality was enhanced for them to believe that they were special and they performed at a higher level. And other people were told they were ordinary and they became ordinary. Now, that's a great example of the power of the story that you tell yourself about your life and about who you are. So think about the effect of that. We become what we think we are, but we also can become what other people say we are. And that's very dangerous, right? If somebody tells you you're no good, and you're a little baby, a little child, how much of your life do you go through thinking that you're no good and operate from that? So the story that you tell yourself about your ability to change or experience life or about who you are will directly affect your experience of how you encounter life. So the real growth and the real success is in how we test ourselves sometimes and how we push ourselves to grow. And that's making the new pathway through the woods. And that's a little harder sometimes. And think about it this way. This is another way to look at it is you might have something you're very successful at and you don't even realize it because it's easy to you. You do it automatically. Good example I can think of is cooking, right? I love to cook. I'm actually pretty good at it. So when I make somebody something and they go, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is so good." And I go, "Well, it's just a steak. It's nothing fancy." Because to me, it was so easy that I don't recognize it as an achievement. But because the other person doesn't know how to do it, they recognize it as an achievement. So do you see what our brain does to us? Things that are easy are just things we do. They're just normal. Where actually they're pretty awesome. But yet something you can't do, you're going to feel crappy about. I'm terrible at baking. I do not have the patience to be measuring that stuff out and getting it all perfect and making it pretty. I can't do that. So I go, I'm really bad at baking. So if it's your birthday, I'm going to buy you a cake. And so now I have a message in my head that I'm bad at that. The truth of it is, I've just never pushed through and tried to do it or trained myself to do it or grown in that way. So in my head, I'm bad at that. But I have to also recognize there's plenty I'm good at too. So your brain plays these tricks on you that says, um, you know, these are the things I'm not good at. But it doesn't recognize the things that you do easily that you did learn at some point how to do. So that's an important part of identifying your strengths and your needs, not your strengths and your weaknesses, your strengths and your needs. So if you can acknowledge your talents and you can feel good about yourself, you will feel better about being open to exploring other things and to be able to say, I'm not really good at this, but I want to try it. And the interesting thing is when you try something new, it feels clumsy and awkward and you screw up. Did you ever pick up a clarinet? Do you think you would sound great? It would sound horrible. So, but that's your brain learning. Your clumsiness, your awkwardness, your struggle is your brain going, I don't know how to do this and I'm messing it all up. But the more you do it, what happens? The clumsiness, the struggle goes away. But your brain resists it and looks at all those things and picks on you. When you fall off the roller skates the first time you get on them, your brain goes, you can't do this. And you know it does. It's the first thing it says. You don't want to do this. This isn't safe. But the reality is, if you did it enough, you probably could figure it out. You just have to get past the discomfort of creating a new neural pathway that says that you can. So I love the example of learning to ride a bike because it's just so obvious. We've all probably done this, but it's interesting. My niece is little and she's learning how to ride a bike, and my family just sent me a little video of her learning and watching her do it. It was so interesting. She's pedaling the pedals like she's never done it before because she hasn't, and she's doing it all weird, and she's struggling and she's getting frustrated. And her father is saying to her, "It's okay. You can do this." And I watched in the course of a 1 minute video her comfort level grow as her brain began to believe that she could do it. And I think it's just such an example of how we learn is we have to get past the unsafe feeling and the awkwardness of fighting our own brain when our brain is saying, you can't do this. It's about safety, that we see danger. Now, what he did was he said, I'm holding onto the back of your bike. And what he also did was he put her on the grass and he gave her a helmet. He made her safe so that she could be clumsy and get used to it in a way that felt comfortable. So I think what happens with a lot of our grown up trying new things is we get blocked. And I think about writers. I've worked with a lot of writers over the years, or influencers, content creators, and they get writer's block. And they think, I can't create anything and I don't know what to do and it's just not going to be perfect. And what I say is get it out and make it perfect later. Because when you're sitting in a writer's block, you're going, I can't do this. It's just not in there. But if you say, I'm just going to dump it all out and clean it up later, your brain opens up and says, doesn't matter that much. This is safe. I can do whatever I want because it doesn't matter. And that works almost every time. You just spill it all out on the paper and clean it up. I do that when I write a podcast. I just spill it all out on paper and then I go back and I go, what's the order it should be in? And sometimes it's stuff that it can be so surprising to me because I'll go, oh, I didn't even know I had that in there. But because I let myself free flow it out, it doesn't feel unsafe to create. So any kind of creator or artist, you'll see they go through different kind of periods or different things that might be better or worse or more representational of what they do. But that's really the cool thing about artists is a lot of artists have that free flow of I can create it all and I can fix it later. That's why their brains are a little bit different. Their brains allow them to flow outward. So the idea is that action is more important than perfection. And I'm going to say that again. Action is more important than perfection. If there's something in your life that you want to change or you feel stuck, it is better to act in some small, messy way than it is to wait for you to be able to do it perfectly. Whether it's navigating a relationship, learning a new skill, talking to yourself differently. I would rather if all you did was change your self-talk once a day than not change it at all. You're still making some growth. So we have an all or nothing attitude around change, and our brains do that to us because our brains will determine something is safe or unsafe. And what it actually is familiar or unfamiliar. The unfamiliar sends a sign to your brain that you're not safe. Think about that. How many things have you wanted to do and you backed off of because it wasn't familiar? And your brain said, nah, you don't want to do that. But maybe you did. Maybe you did. So this is the way it kind of works is that if you don't believe something's possible, your brain filters it out. So if you said, well, one day I want to do roller derby, and you go, well, I can't ever do that, then your brain filters it out and doesn't work on it. But if I said, one day I want to do roller derby, and maybe next year, then my brain doesn't put it in the no category. It puts it in the maybe category. So your brain has to be kept in check so that you're not knowing things because they're unfamiliar or potentially unsafe to you. Your growth and your exposure to novelty is what makes you an interesting person. It's what makes you feel alive, and it's how you find joy. So your brain would rather be certain and stuck than free. And I want you to really think about that. Survival matters in life. And of course, we want to be safe. And your brain is designed for survival. Your ancestors who were prone to threat lived longer because they were privy to what could be threatening and they paid attention. So maybe a little of that DNA came down, that being able to recognize a threat and being able to survive more because you're aware of the threats. But our threats aren't like they were for the caveman ancestors. There isn't a saber-toothed tiger around every corner. But our threats now are an email or a social media comment or a post or a word someone says. And there are threats everywhere. But these are not life-threatening threats. But sometimes our brain is wired to treat them as they are, and we develop incredible anxiety. So it can be reversed. All of this threat-based thinking can be reversed with three things. And I'm going to read what they are: consistency, safety, and support. So think about my little niece Penny riding her bike. Consistency. I'm going to hold on to this right here, and I'm going to stay here with you while you're riding your bike. And you're going to push those pedals and you're going to move forward. Safety. I am going to make sure that if you fall, you're going to be okay. Support. I am here to help you. And guess what? You can do it, right? A lot of us haven't had partners or parents who gave us consistency, safety, and support. So we struggle to provide those elements to ourselves. We're not going to have somebody standing behind us holding the bike most of the time. We have to provide those things to ourselves: consistency, safety, and support. And sometimes those are just things where we've talked about self-talk and how you have to be kind and firm with yourself. Is sometimes you have to be consistent with yourself. You can do this. Even though you're having a bad day, you can do this, right? You're saying that every day to yourself, even on the bad days. Consistency. Safety. Sometimes I have to do this where I'll say, you are safe. You don't have to be anxious right now. You're safe. Safety and support. I've got plenty of people that if I need help, I can ask them. I've got support around me. So sometimes we have to rebuild those because they weren't in us to begin with. So one of the sort of saboteurs of all of this is complaining. We all know somebody who's a complainer, right? You can pick it right out. You could think of your friend group or your family and you can immediately think of that person. Complaining is self-sabotage because what complaining does is it strengthens the part of your brain that specializes in bad days. And it strengthens the part of your brain that specializes in finding problems. So complaining is you rehearsing over and over again a problem and strengthening all the parts of your brain that go, see, the world is bad. Everything stinks, right? But the alternative to complaining is venting. And I want you to think about this in yourself. Are you a complainer or a venter? And I'll explain the difference. A complainer rehearses a problem over and over again to keep the problem close. A venter lets out the problem, same way a complainer might initially, but then processes and reframes the problem so that they can go on with their lives and let it go. And this is a tricky thing because there's a fine line here. But think about therapy. Therapy is the ultimate for this. Is people come in and they go, "Oh, I had a bad day and this person did this and this person did that," and they let it all out. And I don't look at it as complaining. I look at it as venting. And then I'll say, "What was your role in that?" They kind of look back because they're used to complaining and people cheering them on. But what venting does is I help them put into perspective. Oh, well, you started out with a bad attitude, so you were more sensitive to that. Or you're still holding on to that, and you could probably let that go. Or maybe you could solve that. So think about it. Are you venting or complaining? Because venting is solution focused and complaining is problem focused. So complaining is building the neural pathways toward problem holding, and venting is building neural pathways toward reframing. So think about what you're doing and which one is actually going to make you feel better. So I want you to always tell a new story and to come back from trauma and come back from difficult things or just minor irritations in ways that you're telling a story of victory, of I'm better now, I'm okay, I'm safe, right? So think about it like a rep. Somebody said this once and I thought it was brilliant. They said, every thought is a rep. So if you go to the gym and you do 2 reps with a weight, you're not going to get far. But if you do 100 reps every day, you're going to get far. Every use of your brain is a rep. What are you strengthening? So I want you to really consider that. The patterns that you repeat become your reality. So there's a way to think about how do we change that. And there was actually a study in UCLA in 2011 with neuroscientists, they found that asking yourself questions about a tough issue lights up the problem solving centers in the brain. So your brain is always searching for answers as long as you're giving it questions. But the questions turn on the search mode of your brain. So you don't want to have a statement, you want to have a question. And I'll explain what I mean. So if you're struggling with confidence and you can say, I'm more confident than I was last year, but I'm still not confident yet. And you say, I'm still not confident yet. Your brain hears, nope, not confident. You're not confident. But if you say, self, I'm more confident than I was last year. How am I going to be more confident this year? It sounds very Pollyanna, very kind of silly, but it's really not. If you are shutting a door and saying, why am I not more confident yet? Versus, how am I going to continue to grow more confident? Your brain is searching for an answer versus slamming a door. So it's the difference between I'm not confident and how am I going to be more confident this year? Think about that approach if you were dealing with someone else. Would you say, well, you're not confident? Or would you say, how are we going to work on it? You're going to help them find answers. So let's talk about what happens in our brain, though, when we fail, because we all have failures. We all have mistakes. This is a part of life. Some people really beat themselves up over failures and mistakes. I have learned at this point in my life that failures and mistakes are part of the experience, and that I am not a bad person for failing or for making a mistake, but it's all in what I do with that that's going to make the difference. So your brain listens to the words that you say after a miss or a fail. If you say, I can't do that. I'm learning to roller skate and I fell. I can't do that. Well, okay, your brain heard that you can't do that. But if you say, I can't yet, your brain looks for a path. So it's the same thing as the what we just talked about. It's, are you giving your brain the ability to find a path forward, or are you telling yourself that something isn't safe and the door is shut? So think of it as, are you creating brick walls or are you opening doors? And I think the doors are a much better choice, but your brain likes brick walls. Your brain likes certainty. And that's sort of programmed into you. You have to unprogram it and make sure that you turn your walls into doors with the language that you use and the way that you are thinking about things. So the problem is that people usually are pretty smart about this. They can say, well, I know what I should be doing, but why aren't I doing it? And it's probably one of the biggest questions we get in therapy once we're in for a little while is people will say, okay, I know all the things, but why can't I actually do them? And this is where we start to talk about neuroplasticity, is that knowing and doing, there's a gap in between. And the gap is your brain and the way your brain makes meaning. So your brain might tell you that you're safer to stay with what you're doing. And it might find lots of reasons to stay with what you're doing. But it's very, very hard to get your brain to shift, to realize that what you should do is better. Think about the gym. It's just such an obvious example. Everybody talks about going to the gym. You don't have to go to the gym. You just have to move your body. That's the rule. But if you say, I don't have time for that, and you never do it, and you shut that door, you build a brick wall, nothing ever changes. But if you say, I'm going to try to walk 1 day a week. There's that small cutting through the woods. I'm going to walk 1 day a week. Okay, I walk 1 day a week. Okay, great. You cut a little bit into the woods, you started a new path. And even if the next week you only walk 1 day a week, you're still building a new pathway. Well, what do you think the benefit would be is if you got up to 2 days a week? And what if all you ever did was walk 2 days a week and you did that for the next 5 years? That would be pretty remarkable if you walked no days of the week before that. So that wasn't easy to do because you had to convince yourself that it was possible. Then you had to do it over and over again. And now you can't imagine not doing it because it was just the thing that fits into your life now. So that's the way neuroplasticity works, is the difference between what you know you should do and what you should do is an effort repeated. And the effort does not have to be all or nothing. It does not, I didn't say you have to go walk 5 days a week or go to the gym every day. It's that you have to make an effort. The space between knowing what you should do and doing it is not filled by doing it perfectly. It's filled with an effort. So your brain makes false meanings about what's safer. Oh, it's too cold to go outside. Oh, it's too hot to go outside. And those are all false meanings. You're not going to die of the heat. You're not going to die of the cold. It's a short walk, but your brain will try to keep you safe. Your brain is a pattern detecting machine. So if it detects that you really don't go out ever and take a walk, it's going to be like, we don't walk. Remember we talked about the reticular activating system, I think it was last time or the time before, where we talked about your brain will always pick out things that you're looking for. How when you're pregnant, you see everybody that's pregnant. When you have a red car, you see all the red cars. Our brains look for what's familiar and they connect to it. Something unfamiliar is a lot harder to connect to. If exercise is unfamiliar, it is going to be harder for you to connect to. But it doesn't mean you can't. It just means that that machete chopping through the woods is going to take some work to build a new path. Carl Jung, who is the one of the fathers of psychology, and we talk about him all the time because he had good stuff. He talked about the way that humans like synchronicity, that we notice synchronicities in things, even when they're not necessarily synchronicities, but our brain likes to feel familiar and connected to things. So, for instance, when you are breaking up with someone and a song comes on the radio, and you're like, yep, that song was sent, that song was just for me. Truth of it was, you probably heard 20 songs on the way home, but that one resonated with you. Your brain attached to it. The other one is when you start seeing a number everywhere. Let's say you connect to the number 23, it's your lucky number, and all of a sudden you see 23s everywhere. Some people would say it's a sign from the universe. I say it's synchronicity. Your brain craves things that are familiar. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But the problem is it strongly craves the familiar and keeps you stuck in things because they're familiar, even when it's not where you want to be. And the problem is that the brain is very sensitive to bad things. So it holds the bad things as bigger than the good things. Think about when we talked about that car accident. My good thing was we're okay. My friend's bad thing was we got in a car accident. So your brain will always want to attach to the bad, but you have to make a remarkable effort to attach to the good thing. So there's the not yet theory. Everything that you want is not, I can't have that. It's, I can't have that yet. So if you stay curious and open to the possibilities, you're getting your brain out of that fear mode. And your brain will tend to filter what's important, but it always thinks that fear is important. So we want less fear. And we're very subject to sort of what's around us. So this is why we have to be careful about what we're putting into our brain. If you're putting in a lot of negativity or violence or things through social media that don't make you feel good, those things are feeding that part of you that sticks with the bad things. And our brains are pretty simple machines sometimes, in that there was a little test where they show you a picture on a screen. And I looked at the picture on the screen, and then a little thing came up and said, how many red objects were there? And it shows you the picture for a minute, and then it takes the picture off, And I looked really quick and I looked for all the red objects and I found 5. And I passed the test. And then they said, "How many blue objects were there?" I'm like, "I don't know. I was looking for red objects." So in that moment, my brain was only hunting down what was important. My brain decided what was important was the red objects. And the truth of it was is there was a picture full of a whole bunch of stuff, but I trained myself to look for the red objects and therefore didn't see the blue objects. And that's what fear kind of does. When we have a lot of fear inside of us, we tend to look for only the fear objects and we don't see all the other objects in the picture. In UCLA, there was a team of psych professionals led by Matt Lieberman, and what he did is he talked about how do you shift that focus from fear to just healthier focus. And the idea is that humans naturally describe their feelings instead of naming them. And that causes us to stay fearful, and I'll explain. So if I'm describing my feelings on a bad day, I'm saying, I feel like everything is falling apart. I feel like nobody understands me. I'm describing my feelings. That sounds terrible. Nobody understands me. Everything is falling apart. Versus naming my feelings and saying, I feel lonely. I feel alone. Now, I want you to see the subtle difference here. If nobody understands me and everything's falling apart, that's a brick wall. My life is terrible. But if I say, I feel alone, I have now given myself a name for the feeling inside of me, the specific feeling, which then gives me the ability to seek help. So if I say I'm alone, there's a pretty clear solution to being alone. And the solution is to call someone. But if I say my life is falling apart, there's really no solution for that because that's pretty crazy, right? That's pretty big. And sometimes it is. But nailing down what makes me feel like my life is falling apart helps your brain to understand that this isn't a massive life or death threat. I'm just feeling alone right now. And alone passes. So describing your feelings is not better than naming the emotion. Affect labeling is more precise, where you can say, I feel overwhelmed. I feel shameful. I feel lonely. Those things are all workable. Shame, you can talk about with somebody else. Lonely, you can talk to somebody else and connect. If you feel overwhelmed, you can sort out and balance what are the things. So being more precise with labeling your emotions is teaching your brain not to shut down and say that everything is bad. So labeling is the mechanism to find the path out. It's important. And the problem is that we don't usually sort out our emotions like that, and mostly because most of us aren't taught to. We, many of us who didn't have excellent parents or great partners had this thing where we sort of swallowed our feelings. And as we talked about in the last episode on the nervous system, swallowing your feelings without sorting through them causes a lot more problems for your nervous system. And you really are not going to operate fully present because you just keep swallowing. Again, the difference between complaining and venting. Complaining keeps you stuck. Venting helps you to label what's really happening. So, self-compassion, by being kind to yourself and saying, I'm really feeling alone and that's sad and I want to talk to somebody. Self-compassion actually changes your brain too. So, the idea is self-compassion is basically saying, I made a mistake, but I'm not a bad person. Or I did something wrong and I can learn from that. It's the ultimate self compassion to fall and get up again and not shame yourself for it. We will all fall. Everyone will fall and have to get back up. We don't have to attach shame to that. Self compassion mitigates the stress response. So, our stress response releases the hormone cortisol, and cortisol is part of what gets everything up to here in our nervous system. And when you have self compassion or the compassion from another person, it releases oxytocin, and oxytocin lowers cortisol. That's why when your little kid scrapes their knee and you hug them, they feel better because they went into fear mode and you helped them release a chemical that took them back down again. So self compassion is very important. So, how we deal with mistakes is very important in how we change our brain. Because if a mistake becomes a brick wall, I can't do that, you'll never address a new neural pathway. So, I'm going to give you 5 tips for how to acknowledge mistakes. And this could be a big mistake or a small mistake, it works for everything. Are you ready? We're going to go through them and then I'm going to give you an example. Number 1, notice your self critical voice. Are you beating yourself up because of your mistake? Number 2, describe the facts of the situation. Not what you think somebody thinks, not what other people feel. What are the actual facts of that situation? Number 3, what would you say to a friend who made this mistake? Honestly, how would you support them? Number 4, acknowledge the discomfort and label the emotion. I feel shameful. I feel stupid. Whatever the emotion is, label it. And number 5, is there anything to solve? Some mistakes are solvable. Sometimes you can pick yourself up and go do something to fix it. And some mistakes are just mistakes that you can't fix. And knowing the difference is really important because that's where a lot of rumination and anxiety comes from is I should have done this. I should have done this. And maybe there's nothing you can do about it, but you're still thinking you should have. You need to decide, is there something to solve or do we just have to live with this? And I'm going to give you a dumb example to just run through these so it'll be simple. I go to a family picnic and I'm supposed to bring potato salad and I forget. Life is crazy. Everything's going on. And I forgot to bring the potato salad. And all of a sudden, people are looking at me and going, what? What do you mean you forgot? How do we have a picnic with no potato salad? Now, if I'm in a bad place, I'll go, shame on me. I'm embarrassed. I'm stupid. They all think I'm an idiot. How could I forget? Do I not think this is important? I don't think they're important. I could spiral all over the place. But what if I said, excuse me, I got to go to the bathroom? And I went to the bathroom with my 5 things and I said, notice my critical voice. I'm not stupid because I forgot something. I'm being self critical. I've had a lot going on lately. Number 2, describe the facts of the situation. The fact is, it was on my list and it fell off my list. It doesn't mean anything more than that. Number 3, what would you say to a friend? I'd be like, we're cool. There's plenty of other food. It's exactly what I would say. Number 4, acknowledge the discomfort and label the emotion. Ugh, I feel like they think I don't care because I didn't remember. But that's not true. I do care. I didn't remember because I was busy. Number 5, is there anything to solve? Well, ShopRite is literally a mile down the street, and I could go right now and in 10 minutes solve this whole problem and it's over. And that's what I would do, right? So I could run my mistake through these 5 things and walk out of that bathroom and go, I'm cool. I'm going to go get potato salad. Sorry, life's been crazy. Or I could go back and sit down and sit in shame and feel bad and worry what they're thinking of me, and all because of my busy day. And the difference is that the more you do things like that, the more it changes the way that your brain operates. The next time you see those people, will you walk in with that shame still in your heart over something that small? So the way you treat yourself after a mistake is the way that your brain will learn to treat you. And your brain likes the fear of a mistake to point out, oh, this could ruin everything. But most things are not life or death. They just aren't. So you have to recognize that some of these patterns and the way that you react are not based on who you are right now. They're based on the way that you learned to be cared for and the way you learn to manage your emotions. And your brain remembers all of that. We talked last time about all the things that happen in the beginning years of your life shape your emotional reactivity and your emotions overall. So I want you to be kind to yourself and realize maybe you didn't learn how to do this. Maybe you didn't learn how to take care of yourself or how to believe that you could change things about yourself. And trauma does that. And the neural pathways in our brain are automatic. I didn't choose to be in shame in that moment when I realized I forgot the potato salad. I went there right away, automatically, because maybe I was used to being shamed by someone in my life over forgetting things. And maybe that's just where I went, was like, oh, I'm stupid again, right? So I want you to consider that there are changes that you have to make and that they might not be as hard as you think because the you now might not be that same you from when you were traumatized, but your brain is still acting like it. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about here that for you to understand your automatic responses, I want you to understand where they came from. So I'm going to give you 5 examples of some of the wounds that we have that can cause some of this. And I want you to think about these and think about if it's something that affects you or doesn't affect you, but kind of apply it to yourself as we're talking. One wound is being ignored. If you were ignored by parental figures or by long term partners or by people, ignored, you will crave validation. Your automatic pathway when you feel ignored will be to ask for validation. And that's a tricky, slippery slope because the people that are ignoring you didn't give you validation. And you might not get it now the way you need it. So if you have the wound of being ignored, you may automatically crave validation. If you have the wound of being criticized, if you lived with a partner, a parent, anybody, even a close friend who was overly critical of you, you may have an automatic pattern of bullying yourself. Your self-talk might not be that nice. You might give yourself a lot of crap about mistakes. And that might be because if you're used to being criticized, it would be very easy for your brain to jump into that mode because it's used to thinking that way. Another one is being neglected in some way, knowing that your needs were neglected, basic needs, emotional needs, physical needs. If they were neglected at some point in your life, you might not know what you need to take care of yourself. It's that simple. You might, I knew somebody that she would forget to wear a coat outside because she grew up neglected and she was always cold anyway. So, what was the difference? So, neglect builds this disconnection from what you actually need because you're used to surviving. If you had unpredictable caregivers or unpredictable partners, partners that were excessively angry and unpredictable in their anger, or abusive and unpredictable in their abuse, you probably overthink everything because you always had to think about what might happen next and be ready for it. So that neural pathway of overthinking everything and just keeping an eye out for safety or exit routes comes from unpredictable caregiving and partnering. And the last one, if your feelings were not acknowledged. And there are a lot of us that have this, that are in relationships where our feelings aren't acknowledged or grew up like this, where we weren't allowed to say, I'm scared, make me feel better, or I'm sad, can you talk to me? If our feelings were never acknowledged, the pattern we have is that our feelings feel intolerable to us. We don't know how to manage it when sadness comes on. We don't know how to manage it. Even happiness might feel risky because, oh, it's all going to fall apart again. If you weren't taught to feel your feelings and allowed to express your feelings, you might have patterns where those feelings come on and you don't know what to do with them and they feel intolerable. So, your brain doesn't bounce back from all these hardships automatically that I just explored with you. It rewires itself instead to look for them. So that's everything we've been talking about. Your brain looks for the fearful things. So if you have been criticized, you might hear criticism where there isn't any. Somebody might give you helpful feedback at work, and you might react as if it's criticism. Your brain has been rewired. Now you can undo these if you become aware of why you're like that. That's what we do in therapy. This is why you're like this, but now what do we do about it? And then you start to behave differently. Neuroplasticity says you can change your brain, and it's hard. And you have to walk a new uncomfortable pathway over and over again until it sticks. And that's not saying that it's impossible to change, but it's saying that change is hard and takes a connection to yourself on a very deep level. And this is where we go back to the last episode where we talked about your nervous system. It's hard to change when you're up to here in fight or flight all the time. We talked about somatic healing. It's hard to change when your body is disconnected from your mind. That's why this series kind of all connects together, is we're talking about how to calm yourself, how to take care of yourself, and how to make your life different based on taking care of yourself and understanding how you operate. So, what I'm asking is, I want you to build resilience. And resilience is not the mental strength to push through things. It's not. It's actually the processes your brain has in place to manage what comes at you. And a lot of us have trouble being resilient because we're operating off of processes that don't serve us. So it's the ability to get up when you fall because your brain tells you it's okay to get up and that you're going to be all right. So how you recover sets you up for the next challenge. And you can build resilience at any age. The resilience I have developed after 50 is by far anything I developed in the years before. And it's just a matter of learning about your body and learning about your capabilities to change some of the things about yourself that you believe that maybe you couldn't. And it's also about turning every day into a conversation with the universe. What are you going to see out there today? And what does your conversation in your brain attend to? Is it attending to the beautiful, peaceful, wonderful, grateful sort of pieces of you? Are you grateful you walked out of that car after the accident? Or are you fearful that it will happen again? And that's a hard ask. I know I'm asking something very difficult here, but I'm asking you to think about changing what your brain attends to, and that it attends to things that make you feel better and not just the things that you're afraid of. So think about that. And I think we're also going to talk next time a little bit about technology and about the effect that has on our ability to do this and make these changes. So tune in for that one. And in the meanwhile, my sunshines, I want you to keep looking for the sun because it's there, sometimes behind some clouds, but it's there. But until next time, bye.